Hello everyone, welcome to today's Novedge webinar, Understanding the SelfCAD Drawing Tools and Working with Profiles. In this webinar, SelfCAD's creator, Aaron Breuer, introduces some of SelfCAD's unique drawing tools while showing different ways to model a sample of Byzantine architecture from already drawn profiles. He will use some of SelfCAD's more advanced modeling tools to help you make the most of these three CAD web application. Aaron is SelfCAD's president and CTO. He is the brains behind SelfCAD and directs all development of the company and the product. His deep understanding of 3D modeling, space, and exceptional technical ability helps set SelfCAD at the head of its class. And now let me tell you a little bit about Novedge. Novedge is changing the way designers purchase 3D software, offering more choices, more freedom, best advice, faster service, and most importantly, no headaches. Check us out at novedge.com where you can find SelfCAD as shown in this slide. And now, without further ado, I'm going to switch to Aaron's screen.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining me on this second Novedge webinar, and thank you Barbara for having me. The topic for today is working with profiles and mostly existing profiles. It's not about showing off design, it's mostly about showing what SelfCAD could do and just to get you familiar with how you can work with profiles in many different ways. To do that, I have here a architectural design, a Byzantine architecture that I just found online. Just Google that, you can probably find it online as well. And I'm going to use this as an inspiration and show a few things that I'm kind of doing here. I'm not sure if I have a chance to model the entire thing, probably not position all of the windows, will take more time that we have today. But I will focus on, the first thing I'm going to focus is to see this kind of has a lot of details, and to model something like this, you need to measure that and draw that. And I want to show some easy way how we can reconstruct that. The second thing I would like to show is that these windows has a lot of windows, but you can see these are kind of like fake windows. It's not pursing through, it's just engraved, cut out, which is a typical operation you would do with Boolean, but not really making holes to see through within the building itself. And I want to show how actually you can do that. In this case, you do see holes over here, and that's understandable because if you take a normal Boolean, a volume, Boolean cuts out of a volume. So considering the entire building is one volume, if you cut into it apart, you just cut out apart from it and it stays solid. Whereas if you will cut through the entire thing, if the other side windows would be perpendicular and you put something, the thickness of the entire building, it will make a hole. So in this case, he created a hole. So how can you actually make holes in a building like this? And then I'm also going to modify it a little bit because this is kind of everything rectangular. And in reality, that's probably, I'm not an architect, by the way, I have to say that. So I may make many design mistakes during this design. So please forgive me for that. This is not about design, it's about just tool usage. So it may be from architectural perspective, and in reality, most things would be positioned in 2D. So for example, even if you see over here, this is simple pivoted SelfCAD has in the copy offset and option pivot, where you can simply rotate something around a circular function, or any other way you position that. But each one, even if it's rounded, each window is positioned in 2D. But what if you want to position something in 3D and kind of make the window rounded? So this is also where I'm going to explore an option like this. I'm going to modify the design slightly to make it rounded, so I have that option to show that. And finally, maybe we have a chance to talk something else, but what is also interesting here is that you have these nice moldings around the window and how you do that. And similarly, you have moldings over here. So then what's other interesting is kind of like these type of things, how you can make something like this. So I may not follow the exact design, but using this as an inspiration and trying to focus on the topics that I just referenced. So to get started, I'm going to go to freehand drawing, and whoever, if any of one of you have been in watched the first webinar, would see that I've used the same tactic before. I'm actually going to hide this object away, and I'm simply going to drag and drop the object onto the scene, and in freehand drawing, this will flatten it. You see it flattened completely the object. And if I go to my height settings. By default will be 20, so if I finalize it, this will give me a mesh with the height of 20, but if I make it 0, it will finalize as a profile. So now we just got this profile out. So first of all, I have the measurements over here. I have this profile. I will need to remove this piece because I'm going to make it a different style over here. But let's first get rid of this, or just hide this away. Okay. And I want to show if you draw something like this, actually, as I said, you need to have the measurements. So for now, I can use this. So I don't need to measure again, but just kind of show the idea how something like this could be drawn. So if you go to 3D Sketch, the basic idea, let me deselect this so I make a new profile. The basic idea would be you start with, I mean, you can start drawing just a line and start turning. And if you want to make it in such a way, start drawing lines, kind of just one line, then start turning and so on. If it's aligned with the grid, or if you can go to workspace settings and change your grid size, and everything happens to be a measurement that could be aligned with the grid, and use the grid as a reference. If you go to precision settings, there's an option to snap the grid vertices, and you can start snapping that way. Maybe in most cases, most people would probably use the minimum angle step size, and I use this a lot. 15, I think, is default. That's just kind of make sure you draw straight lines. But if you can make like 90-degree angles, you can see all of these are 90-degree angles. And if you know your measurements, you just type in the measurements here in the bottom, start typing, drawing, and you can kind of do it. The other way would be the way I would like to do it is kind of use, you see I have turned on over here to snap to all profiles. So even though despite this is not selected, it's a different profile, we'll still snap to this. So I can start snapping from this profile to this profile and kind of make over here this wrap out over here. You see I'm kind of making the first rectangle, and then I can start building out other rectangles over here and cut out the pieces. So let's say snap from here to here and kind of do something like this, and then start deleting this piece. So go over here, for example, and I delete this, and you can start deleting this, and the duplicated will always be removed, but this case actually need to remove it completely. So we'll remove this as well. And that's one way you can do it. You can start doing it. The other way you can do it, so let me show you actually what could be done the other way. So let me first show that this just worked. So I'm going to, let's just move it up so I can see actually the difference. You can see actually we start creating this. So this is kind of one of the ways we can do it. But let me show you just another way. I'm going to go back to the basic rectangle to make sure we have here, oops, I'm selecting, let's see, just undo all of these steps. And just redo just the rectangle. Okay, so now I have just the rectangle, as you can see. So basically I have just this. So I want to show just another way that could be done, and that's a tool in SelfCAD. All of the tools are, maybe not all, but most of them for sure, are reusable for any mode you are in. So if you're working the same way you saw, just I can use these to select edges and select differences. Same thing with all of these tools. So there's a difference. The tool here is called Add Details, which mostly could be used for objects, but in this case could also be used for profiles, where I can take this profile. You can see here it wouldn't work what I'm trying to do because this has a lot of separate edges, because apparently I didn't pay attention. My cube was set to have more edges. So let's see if I need to go to my cube was set to have 3 edges. So I need to make it to just one edge, and this will work. So somehow this also has some extra edges. So I think I will actually redo this object from scratch for real. So or I can just remove them with resolution 0. Okay, so now what I'm trying to do should work. So I'll go now to let's see, in modify I have the add details tool, and add details tool I'm going to drag the same idea I did before, cutting out, but I'm going to drag this, and I can type in the exact measurements. As you can see, once it releases it, I can type in, let's say, make it rounded to 53, let's say 53, and I can move this down over here, eyeball it. So this is, let's say, let's make it to 70, and yeah, or just eyeball it. And I'm moving it down to this location, and then moving down to every location where I have kind of a break point. Like this. Okay, so now once I moved it that way, I'm just going to go and move it to the other direction. The same idea, just move it here and move it here, and then this, I have this point over here, move over here, and then move over here, and this over here. and that's it. And then I need to finalize it and so on. So now I can go to select over here these pieces, which basically I'm just going to trim away all of the extra pieces. And you can see this actually makes it quite easy to design something like this. I just need to remember which pieces here to cut out. And okay, so this is kind of this piece, this piece, this. And here I want to show you something. You see this actually selects both of them because it finds the minimum cycle polygons. In this case, if I go to edge mode, it would find just one edge at a time. So I can still select it this way, or I can go to polygon mode and kind of find the minimum polygon cycles. Oh, what did I just did? I clicked mistakenly wrong something, deleted. Okay, so undid this changes. Let's see. I did it wrong. Okay, never mind. I have to select it again. So I made my selection. So never mind. I'm going to use the alt profile. So it's just showing this idea. I think it's good for now. So I'm going to use this. So as I said, I'm going to remove this part that has been flattened from the staircase, and I'm going to actually add another piece to it. So I'm just going to remove this, and you see now you can see actually to select entire polygons. That's not what I need. So in this case, I actually need to go to edge mode because I need to remove just this. And I think this piece was also part of the staircase that I don't need. Let me just remove that. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the 3D sketch again, and I'm going to add an arc. Let's make it something less, and let's go to draw from this point to this point. And by the way, you see this details you see, you can go to let me just stop for a second to show. You can go in preference. There's an option for helper sizes, and you see mine, it's set to large. I should set to medium. This will be smaller points. So I'm setting it to medium. Okay, so now you can see, let's go from here to here, and let's drag it out something bulge back, something reasonable. It shouldn't look too ugly. Let's make it 15. I think 15 may be too much. Let's make it 10. And again, I'm not focusing really in design, not a designer, so this may not look as nice. So that's it about the basic building structure. Now, once you have a profile, how do you convert that? So the first thing is that you do is you go fill polygons. I mean, you can go and extrude that and then fill polygons, but in most cases, you will have a better quality of mesh if you first fill 2D, not filling a 3D. I mean, you can fill 3D, but then if it gets very complex, in this case, like very small edges and so on, if you extrude them, it may in some cases not be as perfect. So it's better to first fill them in 2D and then extrude. You can actually extrude. If you do extrusion, this will move up the face like what extrusion is doing, and it will leave you the bottom closed. So for, let's say, for example, I'm going to type in 200 and fill it in that way, you can see it has this hole. And in some cases, that's what you want to do. And in that case, you can go to, there's two options you can do. If you want to add the wall thickness, which we see later, that's one thing needed. You just go and add thickness to it. Let's say minus, we'll put it inside the thickness, minus 10. And as you can see, this adds the thickness to this. You have a wall thickness. That will be one option. And if I cancel this, let's say the other option would be if I go again fill polygons, because these tools are working with everything. You see now the profile is no longer selected, the object is selected. So once the object is selected, I go fill polygons, it will fill holes in an object. In this case, it filled it. So that's one way of doing it, but this is an extra step because you need to fill polygons again twice. The other option would be is to go to add thickness. I first have to fill it again, basically. If you add thickness now, it will just create an offset because these tools are reusable. So let me just show you an example. If I add thickness, let's say to let's say 10, you can see it just creates an offset. And in this particular case, the offset was 10 is too much, so it created this extra piece. This is what can happen with that thickness. If you have extra pieces, no room, you kind of will just need to clip this out. Just go to selection and remove this inner piece. If you make it less, you probably wouldn't have this issue. So yes, you see now there's no issue over here. So it's just when it ends up being self-intersecting, and that's not a problem. But as I said, these tools are reusable. So if you first go fill polygons and then you're going to add thickness, if I put now, let's say 300, or let's say I want to show 300 actually, because I want to show something that you can take. If you take the slider, it goes up to 50. That's the max, but you can always override. So let's say if I make it 200 for now, you can override the slider. And now if you finalize it, this actually gives you both, the fill on both sides. So that's basically we get. You can see we get this building relatively nice, and so we can start working with. Let me make sure it's centered. It was not centered. Okay, so center object, okay. And by the way, I just want to give a heads up on something, because you see I flattened this, I dragged and dropped it, and that's how it was flattened. I really like this tool, I use it a lot to modify profiles. The only disadvantage of it is if you drag and drop, you don't have control, and if you wanted, for example, put it in the center, or if you want to go and draw guides next to it to use it as a way of drawing whatever you want, you would lose it if you drag and drop. So we are updating, probably next update it will be released, that instead of drag and drop, not instead, but in addition to drag and drop, will be another option to just double click on it. And if you double click while the freehand drawing is open, you will keep it in the position, it will keep guides, whatever you have. So you can basically don't lose position, and it will be much more flexible. Okay, so now let's start working with the windows. So let's take a look first what we have on this other object. If you take a look at this, this basically has like one window on each part of the building. And I'm not sure actually this is positioned in the center of each one. Maybe positioned in the center or not. So I can go, and then looks like this is wider. So the wider pieces are just wider and using kind of the same style. So this looks like it's scaled. The bulge factor is probably the same or whatever it is. So let's see if we can start reproducing. So I can start measuring this and start doing it, but I want to show you that's an obvious way, and I want to show you an easier way actually to do it. I've hidden both, so let me just undo this. Okay, so I can go and start measuring this one and go, let's say, over here and see the size basically, and then start positioning the window, start measuring the size. But it would be much easier if I can actually just go to the same tool we used just before, add details. And in add details, there's different ways I can do. If I want to position it in the center, I can basically add the vertex to the center and we'll split it something like this. But for now, I actually want to go to the edge mode, and I'm going to drag. If I start dragging this thing over here, it will basically add to the center over here, and I can just drag or just hover on it, doesn't matter. Just hovering may sometimes, if it can jump around between places, it may be better to drag, but things like this are very well-defined faces, you can just move it without dragging. So I'm basically going to go over here and position over here, and then it gets me the next center, it gets me the next center, and then I'll do over here. So it basically finds me the center, you say it turns green. And obviously if I have measurements, I could just type in measurements, but for now it's easier to do that way. And then I want to find the center of this pieces over here. So here I guess I'll need to drag down the faces. So let's just find over here. I can drag it down actually like this and find the center, but I think I will show just another tool just for the idea of it. So let me undo this and let me finalize this. So we got, there's a mesh mode, you see we got these details. I can start drawing from here, but I want to know also where to start drawing on the height. And as I said, I can use the add details tool, but I want to show something else. So I go to cube selection. And cube selection is also a tool, a very helpful tool that I can cut objects. And I want to move it down from the top. Let's say the height is 200. I want to make it by, I'm just going to guess now, relatively may not be as nice, I can measure, but let's make it to 190, sorry, 190. So that kind of will give me space over here. Let's move it down from the bottom. Let's give it for another 10 above. So instead of 100, let's make it 110. Okay, something like this. Maybe I should make it less, 120 and 180. Okay. So like this, here you go, I got these cuts. So now if I'm going to start drawing, there's a few ways I can draw. So if you're trying to draw over here, I can first position, obviously, draw something and just snap it to its position. I can do that, but there's also another way you can draw on an object. So I can draw on an object also multiple ways. So one way would be if I create a plane perpendicular to this object. So let's say if I go to plane settings, instead of top bottom, I go to front to back plane. And then I choose to snap it, and I snap it to this position. Oh, not front back, I'm sorry. I need to have left right. So that's a left right plane. And let's snap the left right plane to this direction over here. And now I can use these reference points and start drawing. So let's say if I'm going to start drawing now, I may need another reference point over here to start drawing my arc. So yeah, I didn't prepare well for these reference points. Oops, like this. What did I do? Undo, let's go from here, make sure I snap properly to here, and start moving up to, let's make it to 35, and then I'll start drawing an arc from here to here and snap it to this point. So now this is one that we got for this one drawing. I can now go and snap the plane again, snap to this part. So let's see if I snap over here now to this part. So now the plane moved in. You see this gets a different color because it's behind the plane. And I can do now the same idea. I'll start dragging from, let's see, from which point? The second point in. So let's see if I can start snapping to it. It looks like the plane is not 100% snapped. It gives me a little bit problems to snap to it. So I make it 35, and yeah, you see it's not 100% straight. So this will actually already give me an issue. I can probably try again to snap it better. Snapped. Let's see if it's gonna work better now. You can still see it gives me some issues. The plane is overlapping. It's still overlapping somewhat, so it may be related because this profile is drawn on the same plane. No, I don't think so. That's not related to that. Okay, so the other option would be, as you can see, it can work sometimes very good, but in this case it may be not 100% straight, these faces, so it gives me some issues. The other option would be if you actually directly draw on an object. In that case, you have no plane. You see, it turns white. It removes all of the planes, and you can just start drawing on the object. So if you start drawing, I want to draw from here to here. I'm just drawing from here to here and just moving it up, and then I'm going to draw the arc over here, from here to here, and just snap it here. So that's basically, as you can see, this can give me much better details. This particular design doesn't look very nice. The arc is too big for something like this, actually. So from a design perspective, this doesn't look nice. So I would just remove that design. I would make some other design. Just go first on the arc and draw the arc like this, and then I would later go and move this down. I think move it down. So let's do the same thing over here. I'll drag from here to here, from here to here actually. So this actually, how do I know where to drag over here? So let's see, my arc is also not very straight. So let's start with something else now. Drawing an object. I will go and start from drawing from here. It's another way how you can add a line. Drawing a line towards here. So you see now I added a line that I can actually use as a reference, and now I'm going to use this line to draw an arc from. So I'm going to draw my arc from this point to this point, snap it to this point, and now I'll do the same thing over here, from this point to this point, and snap it to this point over here. Okay, so now we got at least something better, and then I'll drag this down. I'll drag this down. Okay. So this is one way of creating that, and obviously I can create the same thing and move it down. So let's finalize this drawing, and let's first do what I said I'll do. So let's take these pieces, and also these pieces, and here I see I have another small piece that gets difficult to select actually. I select it like this. Okay, so let's move this down, and as I can move it down to the same location. I want to do it over here. Okay, so now I need to remove all axes that I don't need. I don't need these pieces. I don't need these pieces, this piece, and this piece, and this piece. And hopefully we got everything clean. Okay, so now I have this. I'm just going to move it down to the bottom and make a copy of it. So I actually don't need the details below. I'm just going to move it down. If I hold down my control key, it will make a copy. Once I have the copy, I'm just going to position it, and I can already let go of the control key, just position it. And obviously I can focus the exact measurement to make sure the height is the same, but that's not the point for now. And I'm going to take both of these, I'm going to merge them so we get it into one object. Okay, so how do I go now about, let's give her a name, side windows. Okay, so how do I go now about using this? So first of all, there's multiple ways. The first idea would be that I can use fill polygon And if I use fill polygon, then I can basically extrude them and cut out. So let's first show this idea how you do it in such a way. Then I show a different way. I wanted to show actually the roundness here that you can wrap while drawing an object. So I think I'll leave the other option over there to show that idea that I wanted to show. For now, I'm going to use this. I'm going to go to, I want to show first actually that I can remove the details. I no longer need the details in the object. I use them as a reference. So I'll go back to the object, remove this, and go to and modify resolution, and I'll make resolution 0. So kind of clean it up. So I don't need that. For the other option, which I'm going to use cut with profile, that's better. Another thing actually I want to show you that the idea I just did first the arc and then move it down is actually cleaner, because look at this window, it's not nice. I didn't draw it nicely. Obviously it's my fault at this point because I didn't measure properly, but yeah, but in this case you see you get much better way of just dragging it down. So, but again, the point now is not for design perspective, and design flaws is expected from my designs. Yeah, I'm not a designer. But nevertheless, so let's see now what I'm going to do. I'm going to uncheck this. I'm going to go to fill polygons. That's one option. And now I can go to extrusion, or actually better to use add thickness, so I don't need to fill polygon again. I'll extrude it by adding thickness of 50. And as you can see over here, this is actually very interesting, because whenever you draw profile, you have to know the positive and negative. This works based on normals. And in this particular case, when I drew this part directly on the object, while these parts were drawn using draw an object, one created the normals inwards, one outwards. So you can use flip normals to flip everything, but in this case it's not going to help you. So let me actually show something. It's very interesting SelfCAD that's about flip normals. So if I would take an object, let's say a basic object, and I would go to a single face selecting, and then I'll go to this tool that is called flip normals. And what's happening is now, actually this flip, you don't see anything. If you turn on back face cooling, you see actually it shows you a hole, because this is kind of negative space and wouldn't show anything. So this is back face cooling. If you would go now again without selecting faces, let's deselect faces, make sure not to get selected, and if you go again to flip normals, it shows you fixed normals in correct orientation. So it tells you what it did. So it tells you it's fixed, and now you see it's fixed, because even if I have back face cooling on, this is fixed. If you do it again the second time, flip normals, now when everything is fixed, the message tells you flip normals on all geometry. So now you can see actually just the inside of the object because it's flipped. So if I flip it back, I mean, if you turn off backface cooling, you can see just the outside. If you turn it on, you see the inside, which is actually quite cool. So flip normals will always first fix the geometry, and then once it's fixed, it will do it. And just as a hint, this will work only if you have a geometry that has a normal volume. If you have like self-intersecting faces or badly non-manifold geometry, it will give you an error. It cannot flip a non-manifold. And in that case, you can only flip face by face, but the entire object, because this idea that it will try to fix only if you have the entire object. But nevertheless, in this case, this wouldn't help me, because if we will try to find a volume, we have separate volumes that are actually very good. This looks like negative space. I mean, outside space, this is negative space, inside space. So there's actually nothing wrong with that. So this wouldn't fix it to me. If I'm going to flip normals, would just flip everything and wouldn't help me anything. So how can I do that? Let's get rid of this cube. What I'm going to do actually, I'm going to scale this first. So I get, because I need to have this sticking out the side. So I'm scaling it first out like this, and then I'm going to split it. I could have actually split it before the profiles, but now once I have already the objects, I'm going to split it this way. And I go back to my cube selection. And in cube selection, you see we used it before with exact selection. Now I'm turning off exact selection because I don't need to cut anything. I just want to select this pieces over here to make sure it's selected just this. I don't intersect anything other than this and entirely this. So that's fine actually. So now I'm finalizing this, and I'm just going to go to split. And once it's split, I'm going to move it into align it with this. Have to be exactly aligned. And now I'm going to select this and I'm going to merge it together, merge objects. Okay, so now if I have these merged, I'm selecting again this object, and I do the obvious, which is stitch and scoop, using the difference option. Let's cut it out. Okay, so this actually worked as expected, but as you can see, it didn't cut through, it didn't burst through the entire way. So it's kind of like just left it engraved the same example I showed the building example that I used. So how can I solve that? So basically, if I want to push through the window, the entire side have the exact same amount, that's actually quite simple because I can just scale it out of this side. And now if I'm going to do stitch and scoop, I should basically get this out as a whole. As you can see, it's pushing through properly without any issue. But if I want to get it just cut over here, so if you remember what I showed in the beginning, that you can actually use extrusion and then add thickness to the walls, and you can model the walls. If you will have thickness, will have the same effect. So that's in reality is something that's, let me undo the scaling. Okay, so that's in reality is probably the best way. If you're going to model, you probably go model the walls separately and the floor and roof separately and you're adding thickness. But if you have something like this, it's not suggested to add thickness to enclosed objects. You don't see what's happening and you make it non-manifold, but you probably will have to open it and then add thickness. But nevertheless, this should do the trick for now. So I'll add thickness -5. Let's say to add something. And now if I take the same object and I go to the same stitch and scoop idea, and then if I go to remove this, now you see it actually cut it out completely nicely. Okay, so that should work. So for now, that should be fine. I'm canceling this. I'm going to undo my add thickness as well. And let's just undo all of these steps. Okay, I hope I've undone it. And now let's hide away this object and show another idea what could be done. So other idea could be done is I can take these objects together, the profile itself plus the object, and I can use a tool here that is called cut with profile. And cut with profile, you see it cut everything. So now how do I use this? So if I go to polygon mode, the same thing I've shown before, there's something called part selection. If I go to entire polygon, you see it selects entire polygon. If I turn on part selection, I should be able to select out these pieces. And now this actually gives me a lot of flexibility. So I can just delete them, but I'm not going to delete them. I'm going to split them because I'm going to use them later to create windows. And for now, I'm going to hide them just to show. Actually, you see this cut through completely. If I'll turn on my backface cooling, it's probably going to show me a hole because there's no thickness to it now. So this actually shows me a hole. But if I'm going to add thickness now to this object, so let's just go to add thickness. Now I can add thickness and I'll add a -5. And as you can see, now we have no hole and it has a thickness added and everything is perfectly fine. So with this approach, you can also use now taking back this windows, as I said, and I have now a separate object that are the windows, and I'm going to make sure everything else is deselected. This is deselected. Let's say if we're going to add some texture to it to make it look like windows. So let's say you can add a texture to make it look like glass, and SelfCAD's adding rendering will look much nicer obviously later once we have rendering, but for now for the basics you can see you have this basic object, and obviously this is non-manifold. I have to add thickness to this as well. I mean it's just a surface, doesn't have anything, so I can add volume to this as well, and now this is an object that has some thickness by itself, and so on. And also once I have these profiles now, I can add some trimming to this profiles now. So what you're going to do is, and that's what I said in the beginning, I want to show how you can make trimming. So there's different ways you can make trimming. So for now, I'm just going to use idea. Let's make sure I deselect everything. And I'm going back to my drawing. And I'm going to draw, let's say, a circle with an edges of 4. Okay, so this will give me kind of an interesting shape. It's like a rectangle, but just with an angle. And let's make the size just 5. Okay, I think 5 should be enough. And now let's select this profile and go follow path. So follow path basically should give me this nice trimming, and the reason I gave it this angle, you see, like here you can see how bad it is, the design, and yeah, as I just said before, this just a design flaw, it's not a problem with the software. And you can see how nicely this is added trimming. And obviously you can make your own profiles the way it should look, and that will be much nicer. And obviously now the best idea is now to merge them. Basically, let's merge all of these profiles. Yes, they're all selected. I've deselected the profile itself. Just created this. I'll merge them objects, and let's, while in the spirit of adding some textures to them, let's make them look like some nice wood. Maybe, and again, this is not nice the way it should be after we add the rendering, but for now, at least something. Make it look something good. Okay, so here's the part that I wanted to show. Drawing an object, I just want to show the piece, and I'm going to finish on these windows, but just the idea that the broken object can actually wrap objects as well. So if I'm going to create now, let's say go back to my friendly arc, and if I'm going to draw something like here, let's say to here, and I'm going to draw this out, something like this, and now let's go and make a line, let's say from here to here. Okay, so this actually is now drawn completely on the object and wrapped. And what you can do other things as well is, first of all, let's see, I can select this piece over here. Let's just select this piece and this piece. Now I can simply drag select them. Let's move it down. Okay, so I created something like this. So what you can do now is another thing, you can cut with profile the way shown before. And in this case, actually cut with profile may be an issue because this is completely intersecting, or maybe not, but yeah, that should work. But the other thing I want to show now is another idea what you can do. You can actually make a copy of this. So let's say if I select this profile, just the profile itself, and I'm going to go now to the move tool just a second and hold down my control key to make a copy. So hold the control key to make a copy. You can make a copy without holding down, without going to the move tool. It's just that this gives me the gizmos, which I like it. It gives me control where I want to do it. And now if I select these both profiles, I can go to loft actually, and I can simply loft this. And in this case, you can see actually this created this piece, which I can use later to cut out or make it a window with the thickness that I want, but also it created this kind of rounded. It's not so rounded, and yeah, it may be nicer other way, but that basically shows you the idea that you can do another option that you can do. So I think that's it for now about these. It's just going to take too much time to model all the windows, and it's not going to teach anything new. So I think I can get rid of this and get rid of this profile as well. Make sure that's what we select. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to show is actually there's another thing that I'm just going to point and not show it now because I guess I can show it, but it doesn't matter. You have something, a stitch and scoop, if you have the intersection part. If you do an intersection part, it will give you just the inside part intersect. If you add a thickness of 5, and if you add, like, say, what I did, I scaled it for 50, it will give you just the 5 part, just the intersection part, which is also interesting if you want to do what I just did over here to create the windows. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the other ideas of creating something around this profile. So I'm going to move up this profile to, let's say, 200, and I have selected the object as well. Let me just deselect the object. And let's see if I've selected still more things. So it's safer just to deselect everything and select just the profile. And by the way, you can if you have too many objects, you can just type in over here. So side, and I named it side windows, and it will just give me this object. So I can move out this filter to show everything else. Okay, so I'm going to move this up. This is side windows. Okay, I didn't want the side windows. Okay. I want to get the profile 1. That's what I wanted to get. So deselect side windows, gets profile 1. That's what I wanted. Okay. So if I'm moving this up to, this is, I guess, 200, right? So now 200. And this is why you see it snapped to 200, because you have over here an option that you have minimum step size. So minimum step size of 1, that means it would be 1. So it didn't put it like 199 point something or 200 point something. So, but you can obviously change these step sizes. And in rotation, this is very important, actually, step sizes, to be able to rotate precisely. So in many cases, I think a default may even be 5. So in many cases, you need to change it to get more precision. But nevertheless, once I have this ready over here, I'm going to track them with something. I actually prepared, just for a test, may not be as nice as it should be, but I created something I want to show that we have, besides this panel, which is the active objects, we have an option to have a library of objects. If you go to, you have load objects, save objects. I can save an object that goes to a library. And besides projects, you can make different projects. You can also have objects. The difference is a project is kind of a new project, and whatever stays in the project stays in the project, and you go to a different project, you see what belongs to that project. Whereas object is kind of a library that will be globally accessible. Whatever you have in the objects will be available in each project that you have. So I just created something that I found a molding profile. I'm just going to double click on it to load it into the scene. And I'm going to use this to do, may not be the nicest thing, just found something from a different project. I decided to use it for now. And that's basically is the same idea, follow path. I can use the follow path, and this kind of gives me this part. So I still need to add thickness to it, but kind of gives me the idea how you can add different profiles. And obviously you see now, because I have my backface calling on, it shows me this hole, because that reminds me I need to add thickness, which I like the model with this on. It tells me basically what I need to do. So if I deselect the profile, just this, I can go and add thickness to it. Let's see, a -5 may be too much for them, but yeah, it actually works nicely. Actually, if it works nicely, it does not mean. I think you have a small problem over here, because the same issue I showed before in profile, these wouldn't really make sure it's not self-intersecting. And if the 5 thickness over here will self-intersect, you may have a problem printing it. You may need to use later magic fix or something else to fix it. So, but for now, yeah, let's just make it -1 to make sure it's kind of, yeah, you see now you have no issues over here. So self-intersecting is something we don't really prevent, and you have to make sure it's done automatically, but we have the tools to fix it if you do have something like that. So that's one option you can do. The other option you can do is you can actually just, let me just hide this for a minute, and you can just make copies objects around. So if I would take, let's say, any mesh that I would want to copy on it, so let's create just a basic profile. So let's go and take just draw some basic profile here. I'm going to go to the drawing, and I will draw something over here, let's say 10. And now I'm going to go to offset the plane by, let's say, 20, and draw again the same idea, grid vertices. It may look like it's not offset, but I can go to graphic view, and I can go to graphic view from here, or I can just use my space bar. Actually, we'll do the same thing. And let's go now to 40, offset a little bit more, and so I have the same idea. And let's type in 10, and okay. So now let's press my space bar and back to normal view, and let's see. So we got actually 3 different. Actually, it's in one profile. You can split them to have different profiles, but in this case, it should work in one profile as well. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to loft. And if you go to loft, first of all, now it looks like a normal cube. It's not a big deal. But I'm going to select the second profile, and I'm going to add to it a rotation. Let's try it, 90-degree rotation. And now it looks like just broken. It's not enough. But if I'm adding smoothness, actually, it should start acting much nicer. And I can try to see if bevel will help. I think in this case, bevel shouldn't really do much benefit. Nah, bevel wouldn't look nice at this point. So I think just make bevel 0. And just a simple smooth transformations actually will kind of look something decent. And in this case, let's say if I take this object, let's just scale it. I think I should scale it in both directions, keep the Y high, and scale this just to 10. Make it look a little nicer and stretched. Let's make the Y to 50. And obviously you can play around more with all transformation tools and taper and whatever, but let's just taper it a little bit, just kind of to give it an idea. Yeah, it's hard to see, it's such a small object. Okay, whatever. So now if I want to take this and go back to the profile itself, first of all, let's show the object. Oh, the object is here, it's just out of the view. Okay, so let's go back to the profile that I had, this profile, and select only this, and deselect the object, select it. Okay, and now if I go to follow path again, it's a tool that you can use for copy as well. Now you see you have different options. You have an option to duplicate, and then in this case you can choose how many copies you want to make to duplicate them, and you have a copy to wrap. If I can add more copies, kind of, this will add me more copies I want to do, or you can wrap it, which will automatically give me kind of a wrapping, but then you have options which part you want to do it. So you want to do the top, right, like different settings. So obviously I need to move her up because it takes the center of the line. I'll need to move her up position. So just to show you, there's different options you can do, and without tangent, will give me different view, and yeah, there's different type of settings over here that you can do. So for now, that's basically it. The last thing that I wanted to show is how you can make on that top kind of an object like that will kind of sticking out that way. So I can get rid of most of these objects over here, and yes, I can get rid of this as well, just to clean up a little bit here. And let's say we keep that, we keep the windows, I have to select it. I show everything. Okay, so let's go to a simple cylinder, and just to wrap her up quickly, a simple sphere. And let's see, where's my object? It's so big, it's on top of the object. Okay, so let's make it 100. And I'm just gonna move her up later. Okay, segments, arc, 60. Okay, let's just finalize it. And let's move her up to position. It is in position to center. Let's make sure my object's in center. I think the object is center as well. Let's just move this up. Okay, so I can move her in partially like this. And let's scale it down a little bit still. Something like this. Okay. And now I can probably move it up. And again, this is not an exact design, so please don't judge it based on design, but just showing the capabilities that could be done. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to go to the face selection again, and I'm going to loop select. And I'm going to loop select here entire loops, but every second. I'm going to skip every second and simply select each of these. And okay, and there you go. So once I have these selected, I'll go to extrusion, and here we have different options again. If I have the backface calling on, it's on. So this should be able to show me which option will give me halts. So let's actually extrude them a little bit more. It's not realistic, but let's just extrude them a little bit more to be able to see what's happening. If I turn on the vertex normal, actually this gives me a much nicer view. If I make it individual, this kind of gives me the spikes that or connect neighbors, gives me this. Actually, each of them will give me manifold options, so it's no need to make them individual. Just make it vertex normal. Actually, in this case, gives me a much nicer view. You can see actually vertex normal flips it. So if I have 10, let's say just 10, not negative 10, without vertex normal, it's with vertex normal out. In this case, it's in. And the reason for that is actually because I selected, actually in my design, initially the test I did it differently, where I first select only until here. The way I did it is I loop selected with a, actually it's, maybe I should show that, it's out of time, but I selected basically loop selection with a custom pattern, every second one, here and here, and then I selected region select from here to here. But in this case, I select entire circular loop, which in this case, it has a problem without vertex normal finding the direction, because the other side, it's different directions, but vertex normal will give me direction. But I think I would show how I did it the other way, something like that. So what I did is I went to loop selection, and I did basically something like this, and I did custom pattern, which you can set to skip, but I kept the default over here, and I kept it over here, something like this. And then I selected from here to here as a range, and I turned off the custom patterns. So this takes a little bit longer, but in some cases where you have the normal issue, you're anyways going to cut out later the bottom piece. I didn't want to get a kind of just the better way, I guess. You shouldn't have to have normal issues. The vertex normal option extrusion will solve this issue, but it's good to know this other option basically. So, and in general, the custom patterns is really, really cool. What you can do with a lot of interesting designs with it. And sometimes it can save a lot of time. But nevertheless, once I have this will give me a little bit different look at extrusion because it didn't select the top faces. Now you see, even without vertex normals, I get it correctly. And I can do vertex normals also, but both of them will look much nicer now because I selected just one direction. The only difference is vertex normals will, if you get the bottom piece or not. I can separately select the bottom piece and extrude them, get a different view. So I think I'll keep it like this. And then obviously I need to select the top as a polygon, but let's first select the bottom piece. And over here I'm going to loop select the bottom part, and this, let's see, oh, it doesn't allow me to no longer loop because this is extruded. So you see now, so I do have a problem selecting them with loop. I need to manually select them, so I'll leave it for now. If I go to polygon now, I can select this piece, but this is also interesting thing that I can show because this is not flat. A polygon basically select flat, but this is not flat. So in polygon selection, you have also tolerance. So if I up the tolerance a little bit, I can already select the polygon. So one is actually too much. In this case, tolerance wouldn't help me either. We'll select the entire thing. If I want to extrude the entire thing, this will work, but in this case, that's not what I want. So how can I do it? I can basically just go to face selection, and I can drag select this entire thing. And face selection basically works if you go from right to left, everything intersects. If I do in the center, it intersected, all of them will be selected, but left to right will only select that completely is in my rectangle, so it wouldn't work in this case. And now basically I can go extrusion again, and yeah, you get the point. So now you can start designing all these other parts, but I think for now we are done. So you actually do see here some holes now that I look at with this way. So now I can test actually if the flip normals function would fix them. So let's see. So let's go flip normals, and okay, actually it did fix it. Okay, so it is fixed now. So as you can see, no more holes over here. So this is very important if you model for SelfCAD. Put a lot of emphasis for 3D printing, and if you model in most applications, if you model in, not to say names, but in most traditional modeling applications that you do architectural design, it's almost guaranteed 100% you end up doing non-manifold geometry, and it's not usable for printing. You'll have to use like Mesh Mixer or other tools. In SelfCAD, we initially designed this for 3D printing, so we put a lot of emphasis on manifold geometry and all of these. So you have all of these tools to do it, and if you don't care about 3D printing, maybe you could just turn off the backface cooling. You don't really care about it. But if you do care, if you want to print a model itself, this basically should give you that option. And the last thing, I didn't do it now, I can just show you the idea how I would remove this bottom piece is basically using the cube selection again, and obviously I can start just cutting out the pieces, and if I know the exact measurements, or you can start basically doing, you see now the details over here. I want to make exact selection, and I can just cut this down a little bit, and I can basically cut it out. I would go the inverse select. You see the image over here what I selected, what I did. I would do the inverse select, and now you see it inverse selected, and I simply click delete, and now I can fill polygons, which will fill it, or I can add thickness to it. In this case, I'll go to fill polygons, and basically it added this piece. If I'm going to move this up now to see, you can see basically, just drag it down a little bit, you can see we basically get the bottom filled correctly. So just undo this, and we are done. So obviously if we have more time, we can add a lot of the details that we designed, but that should be the basics, and I think that covers most of the tools you can do with profiles. Besides, obviously, I said all of the transformations, deformations, and all these other tools are available. Obviously, I didn't touch the chamfer and fillet. All of these are very interesting, but these are tools you can test yourself, and hopefully you learned something. And if you like it, please comment. As Barbara said, this should be hosted on YouTube later, and we'd love to see your feedback. Thank you. Barbara, back to you. Bye.
Find SelfCAD on our webpage, and go look for novedge.com. And as you can see, the solution is not just easy, quick, it's also reasonably priced. So check it out. Aaron, I don't see any question yet. I think you were very clear. Great. I can wrap it up. Thank you for today's presentation, and I invite everybody to visit novedge.com, where you can find all the 3D software choices and freedom to select multiple tools in a one-stop shop. Thanks again for joining us today. And this webinar is going to be recorded on YouTube and Vimeo. So check it out later on today. It will be uploaded. Thanks again for joining us today. Bye-bye, everybody.